to the Barefoot Bushcraft radio show. Today is Saturday, May 4th, 2013, and we are broadcasting live on Freedomizer Radio. In this episode, we discuss some emergency preparedness week, review the WJQ-308 Military Shovel, and talk to a special guest from Brothers of Bushcraft. This is your host, AD Venture.
Hello, and I'm the Wolfman. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, can you hear me all right?
Oh, I hear you perfectly. Can you hear me fine?
Absolutely, I can. I am coming to you today from an outdoor education center in Niagara Falls, Ontario, where I spent the day instructing archery. It was an awful lot of fun with my students. And here in Southern Ontario, it is a beautiful day out today. So if there's a little bit of background noise, I do apologize to my listeners in advance, but I am going to be mobile and on the road very soon.
Well, that's great to hear, Wolf. Glad to hear that you've enjoyed the great weather, and it's actually been great to say that the weather's been awesome. Now, about the show, let's get right on into it here. We have quite a few things to discuss. Now, before we begin any news from you, Wolf?
No, not really. Not a whole heck of a lot of stuff going on here. I'm just ramping up for summer. I love going out into the wilderness at my sit spot now. I'm running a sit spot challenge called the Photo a Day Sit Spot in May. And that is for those of you who do routine sit spot challenges. You know, you go to your spot in nature every day, and it doesn't have to be like total nature. It could be something as green as your front yard. And, you go and you sit there for 10 to 15 minutes every day, or 5 minutes or 2 minutes, take a photograph and notice all the little nuances and changes in nature that happen as a result of going there every day. It's a really, really great way to be equated to yourself and to nature. And so it's a really great little challenge. And we can put the information on our website, actually, about how to get into that, because it's done on Flickr at the moment.
That's great. All right, so let's move on to our next segment then.
Sure.
In good news. All right, in Ontario, the province of Ontario, it is now, or tomorrow will begin the Emergency Preparedness Week. That goes from May 5th to the 11th. And if you just look in your in the chat of Freedomizer Radio, you will actually see the URL posted right there. So check that out. And this is it's a great time, actually, at least in Southern Ontario, but it's never a bad time in any part of the world, really, to be prepared for any sort of emergency and just to have a preparedness plan ready. Now, on this particular website that I've put on the chat there on Freedomizer Radio, we have a lot of different things that you can utilize to assist yourself with emergency planning. Now, you've got a planning toolkit. If you just scroll down slightly down the page, you will see that. And you will have not only a PDF version, but an HTML version as well. You have promotional materials that you can read through and just have more information, and even web graphics and banners and such, as well as videos and PDF documents you can read through and such for seniors, for children, for families, and in Ontario, it's recommended that you be prepared for 72 hours in case of any sort of emergency. Now, a while back, we actually had a blackout, actually, and most of the Eastern Coast experienced this as well, and we didn't have power for about 4 days, at least in the region where I was. And it was quite funny to see those that were not so prepared scramble when it came to trying to get goods from all different sorts of places, or trying to manage or not, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I experienced the blackout as well. I was working law enforcement then, doing some street patrol with the company, and we had a rash, of course, of break-ins and things like that had happened all over. And it's always a very unfortunate situation where when power goes out, there's a television show right now called Revolution that is just about that. What if we had no power? And you hear that when the power goes back on, people have died, and I guess as a primitive skills survival instructor and outdoor educator, even as an adventurer, it's a very foreign concept to me. So what, that I lose power? Like, life goes on for me. but for some people, I guess they're a lot more dependent on it. I do remember the positive side to that was when we were out, you would go outside, and when I would drive around on the streets in my patrol car, I would see more people outside, and that was a beautiful thing. As the sun would start to set, there were more barbecues because it was summer when this happened. It was fantastic to see all these people outside, away from computers, gaming systems, whatever. But unfortunately, the deaths were a bit of a concern, and they were a lot of them were, your young people or the elderly who, for whatever reason, simply could not manage without electricity. And that's a real crying shame that we're not that prepared. And that could be something as simple as every time you go and buy groceries, buy an extra tin of food, buy an extra jug of water, look for stuff what's on sale. Because you never know, a couple of dollars here, a couple of dollars there. By the end of the year, you have 15, 20, 30 cans of food, right? And that can be the difference between life and death in an emergency situation.
And that's a great point that you make there. And I think specifically with bushcraft, you made a great point where you don't really question the lack of power. And although obviously a lot of people live in cities, they're not accustomed to losing power, and it's really important to at least try to experience what it is not only to live without power, but how to manage different strategies that can assist you. And I feel that's it's really impassioning to experience things, or I should say primitive skills and that sort of thing, knowing that you aren't relying on a power source to provide for yourself and to maintain some sort of self sustainability and such. Now, you made some great points about keeping goods prepared and planning regarding looking for deals and trying to stock up on additional material. And that's a great strategy, and I also utilize that as well. And it's always good to just rotate through the goods that you purchase. And yes, you've mentioned this as well, where when you purchase something new, the stuff that's in storage, you use that, and you always have something that's essentially fresh, stored away in case of any sort of emergency.
Yes, for sure. And canned goods are always my go-to thing: tuna fish, salmon, ravioli, anything that is going to basically last forever, cans of Spam. The one thing you have to understand is in a survival situation, those food stores, convenience stores, they're only going to have food for like the amount of people that will go and visit them during an emergency. They will only have food for an afternoon, right? You wouldn't want to put yourself into a situation where there could be violence involved. Because you have your family to protect. So if you don't need to go to any kind of urban center when there is no power, when there is a need for food, if you can just hunker down, you are always going to be head and shoulders above everyone else. Cody Lundeen talks in his survival books about taking the opportunity to put yourself in survival mode during the everyday. And he talks about how very few of us, and this is a very, very fortunate thing, very few of us in our lives in a North American or a westernized environment have had to starve, right? There's very few times, and I have to say myself, I have never gone in my life at this point not been able to get food for a continuing basis. I'm not talking for an afternoon or a day, but for like 5 days. Never happened. So what he suggests is go about your everyday, your regular business, whatever it is you do, stop eating and just see how long it lasts. See how it feels. That way, when you're in a survival situation and you've never had that feeling, you're going to understand how far you can go before you're like, oh, man, now I need to eat for whatever reason. He said it's really, really good at least once a year or so to put yourself in that situation where it's like, I'm going to stop eating and see how long I last. Obviously, it's easy to fix that, right? You can bust that anytime you decide, I need to eat or I'm getting shaky or whatever. But it's a really good survival. Like we had talked to Barefoot Mo last week when he said, even if you're not a barefooter, get used to it because you just never know. It's part of your preparedness thing. It's the same thing with stop eating for a while and just see what happens. Understand what your body's going to go through. If you get the shakes, what's going to happen after, Are you going to be able to get past that? Because you may be in a situation where you need to move. Be floods or natural disasters or whatever it is you're preparing for, and you may not have that food for however many days. So it's important to take survival on a day-by-day basis, so you're always preparing, always being ready, always thinking, how am I going to get out of this? What's going to happen if something bad happens? Do I have equipment and supplies in my car? Because, nothing is ideal. You're not going to be at home in the middle of the day or on your day off. Oh, we're now in a bad situation, right? You're going to be at work, possibly miles or kilometers and kilometers away from home. What if you're 100 kilometers from home and it happens? What if you're 1,000 kilometers from home and something happens? What are you going to do? Something that you always need to be thinking about. That's why they say that survival and preparedness is a lifestyle, and it's not necessarily like a crazy sort of, overzealous lifestyle where you're concerned about how things are going to be and you're always preparing about the zombie apocalypse and the government taking over. It's just like, if I were stranded here, how would I get home? And that is very much more internal and something that almost everybody, like you driving up the road and your car breaks down. How are you going to get home? What do you think?
No, that's absolutely correct. And just like you just mentioned, that and this is something that we should make to the listeners, that preparedness and survival preparedness is not all being so serious and obsessed about the minutia and so forth. It's something that you can easily integrate into your life and help with just making routines out of what you do normally, and just being prepared. And it really isn't a big step when it comes to involving those aspects into your life and just being prepared and having that mentality. But when one thinks, a survivalist or a prepper, and I honestly hate those words, and that would be a topic for another show altogether, so we'll have to cover it another time. But these words really don't, they give a false connotation where, it's like some grizzled old man who's, dug a hole in a mountain and is, hiding away from the authorities or something. It's nothing like that. That could be, somebody who thinks with a preparedness sort of mind could be, just a homemaker who could, be preparing goods and skin them in the cellar and just being ready. It could be anybody, really. So it's something that you can easily integrate into your life, and I feel that that's something that's just integral with bushcraft itself, where these sorts of things are just standard, and it's not really viewed as sort of obsessive, because it's not. It's just, being prepared is just a normal fact of life, and it's not, because we do have to be honest. We, just as you said, we don't go long periods of time without eating. So we are fairly privileged here in North America with having access to food and to shelter and to all these sorts of amenities. So, it's really important that we understand these sorts of things so that we can be prepared for them.
For sure. Now, one of the other things that always comes up invariably in every single conversation about survival and preparedness is people asking about firearms. Should you stockpile firearms? Should you stockpile ammunition and have one or two? What's the best this? When you put it into the perspective of what can happen by way of natural disaster, you have to ask yourself where your money is best spent. And, I'm not going to lie. Firearms are expensive purchases. You go out and try to buy like a Beretta pistol of some sort or whatever, anything that's decent quality, or Colt or whatever your preference is, you're looking at $1,000 to $5,000 if you buy one of the high-end ones. Now, if you look at that, so, okay, I went out and I purchased a pistol. Let's say I get a used surplus military one for a couple $100. In most countries, except for some areas of the United States, you can't just put that in your backpack and wander around with it or strap it to your hip. And even if you did, are you asking for more trouble if you have that? would that $3,000 or $500 or whatever it is you would spend maybe be better spent on food or supplies or some other form of preparedness? Now, yes, I'm the first person, because I'm in the backcountry an awful lot, to say having a firearm is a good idea. It should not ever be your number one focus. What if it gets taken away by the government? What if you lose it? What if it breaks? It's a machine, just like a car. You know, it would be like if you had your survival plan, 120% focus on your car. Well, now your car blows a tire. Now what are you going to do? So I think it may be something that you may consider is important, especially if you're in the wilderness, not so much for defense, but warding off predators, you know, bears or whatever, or maybe hunting if you hunt. But if you're going to adapt that lifestyle, then again, like all of the other things in bushcraft is long-term survival on a primitive skills area. We've discussed this before. Make sure that you are hunting. Even if you're just taking a rabbit or something small, understand what you're getting into. There's so many times we, both AD Venture and myself, come across people, I've read all these books. When have you done it? When have you gone out there? Like we had talked about with bow drill and hand drill, it's okay to read the book. When have you actually felt that wood under your bare feet and you got that cold? It's an amazing feeling. It's the same thing if you're going to collect firearms and you're going to say, in an emergency, I can hunt. Make sure you're out there doing it. Make sure you understand when you kill whatever it is you kill, what a big job that is of pulling the thing apart. And it's a gory, gross job, blood and guts everywhere. It is not fun. Maybe it is for some people, but I have done it, and it is not something I would rather do wild animals. It's not that I'm not capable of it. It's just a gross job, you know. I've even had some people say that they will try to find who don't want to go and kill, or they live in an environment where it's just not feasible. They will look around for roadkill, and they're like, oh, this thing just died. I can take it home and take it apart and learn from it. And to a certain extent, that would be a way you could honor that animal that got hit by the side of the road by taking it home and dissecting it and learning from it and saying, okay, if I were to eat it, maybe I could eat this part. Obviously, don't eat roadkill. I'm not advocating that, but to take a fresh kill and to learn from it might be a very, very positive experience. I have to admit, I grossed my mother out on more than one occasion growing up, doing that sort of thing, learning from dead animals that I've found, as long as they weren't too stinky. I don't know.
Well, don't forget to check out Emergency Preparedness Week here in Ontario. At least check out that website that we've put out there. If not, just check out www.emergencymanagementontario.com and .ca. My bad there. Just to find out more about this week, which I do have to say I haven't really heard much about in the media, both local and provincial and national, which I guess is somewhat of a testament of perhaps this particular ministry's disconnect with the public. Perhaps it's a lack of funding. That would be something to discuss in another show. Perhaps I'll have to discuss with them personally just to find out why that is. But, check out the Emergency Preparedness Week. Now, Wolf, I've got to mention, though, that we now move into our tips and tricks segment. And I definitely want to hear about your adventures with the WJQ-308 Military Shovel.
Yes, and wow, what an amazing tool this is. Now, to give our listeners a little bit of background, and I think we've mentioned this a couple times, we're professional gear testers. So companies from around the world will send us their products to basically take out into the field and to use and abuse and beat the heck out of them. And the purpose is not to break them, but the purpose is to take these tools and find out what is the best way to use this, and is the tool as good as it says? We are basically like a third-party independent testing facility for these things. So I got myself a good shovel. It is called the WJQ-308. And this shovel is designed by the Chinese military. Now, if you go onto YouTube, and maybe AD Venture can put the link up, there's a really corny video, and it has this bizarre music that does not match the genre whatsoever. It's from a Western movie, this music, and it shows this shovel, and it has all these different features. So the shovel has a saw, a bottle opener, a knife, a hammer, a nail puller. I'm trying to think of all the other things that it does. And the video goes through it all. And it's in kind of broken English. And so anyway, we have two of these shovels. And we decided to make some videos, of course, like we were asked to, about how these shovels function. And
now,
it has been...
Sorry, I just want to quickly give the title of the video on YouTube. So if you want to look out for this video, it's called Chinese Military Shovel WJQ-308 bracket HQ plus full length close bracket. You will see this video we're talking about.
Yes, and it's well worth the watch. I mean, even if you don't believe in the shovel, the video is really fun to watch. And I don't know whether their intent was to make it funny, but it's a funny video. So anyway, I take this shovel, and I've had this for a little while. I've been waiting for the weather to warm up. So I decided the other day I'm going to take this thing outside, and I'm going to put it through its paces because it's exciting. It's a very exciting product to have. In survival and bushcraft, one of the things we always talk about is nothing should have one purpose. Nothing. So everything should be multi-purpose. So a shovel shouldn't just be a shovel. And a knife shouldn't just be a knife. It should have multiple purposes, which is why we create things like survival hats that are not just a hat. They have paracord on them and wire and all sorts of stuff like that. So I take this thing out to my backyard, and I use the hammer on the saw and the shovel. So I'm hammering in nails with it. I'm cutting up potatoes with it because it has a knife blade, and I wanted to reproduce the factory video. So I get to the dig portion. So I'm out there in the soft, really, really soft ground, the backwoods of the forest, in my bare feet, so it's not that hard to dig. And I step down, and I pull on the shovel, and the handle snaps right off in my hand. I couldn't believe it. It was like totally unexpected. So I'm like, wow. But everything else is pretty awesome about this shovel. So I went to a local hardware store, and I bought a hickory handle, and I put a hickory handle on it. And I'm continuing to film this that is going to be, it's been a challenge to film because it's very, it's fun, it's corny with this really bizarre music. But the shovel itself is so far is everything that it's supposed to be for a multi-use piece of equipment. I could not recommend anything better for having in your car. Again, you're having something that is as delicate as the ability to cut through a potato, to cut wood, branches, saws, hammer, everything that you could possibly use if your car goes off the road in a ditch and you're stuck there for a couple of days. I mean, it's a really amazing tool. So once you get past the music, and again, if you haven't seen the video yet, please watch the video. It is well worth the 8 minutes of your time to watch it because it's so much fun. But yeah, the shovel is really something else. It has so many multi-features, so many different things, with the exception of the handle. But as a bushcraft guy, it was pretty easy for me to put a new handle on it. So yeah, I don't know. I know AD Venture, unfortunately, we live quite a distance away, so we don't always get to collaborate on all of our projects together. But he's pretty pumped as well. If you're interested in taking a look at how the video where the shovel handle broke, it did snap off, and it was captured on camera. I don't know, AD, why don't you describe the video? Because I'm a bit partial to it. So maybe you can describe it as you know, you weren't there, you just got to see the end product on the web.
Well, it's actually quite funny because I had a lot of questions for Wolf after I saw these things, these events on the video, and compared to the actual original, which yes does have the corniest music, which is totally unrelated to what you're seeing. It's definitely something to see, but compared to the video that's shown, you're seeing things where people are carving basically into what, like rock almost, it appears, and
yeah, it looked like it was like clay or something. It was like a clay cliff. Now, I haven't got to filming that section yet, but it looks pretty promising. Like I say, with the exception of the handle that's busted up on this thing, it's a pretty amazing tool. Like, it really is everything they say it's supposed to be.
But my point is really that the effort that I saw that they were going at it at that clay cliff, just hammering it in there, and just the lack of effort that you showed, it honestly to me looked like you were maybe digging, to put a plant in the ground or something, a little gardening, and just seeing the handle snap off, I was curious about, because it looked more like it was maybe punky wood, and again, this is coming from China, so who knows the conditions that it was kept in transit that it got here in North America. So perhaps that's a reason why it snapped. But just the lack of effort that you showed in digging where that handle snapped was not only hilarious, but really made me question the difference that you saw between your video and the official video.
Well, I think the honest reason why the handle snapped is to be blunt, I was beating on stuff with it. I was hammering nails in with the shovel. I was chopping down trees. I was just basically pummeling it, right? When we do gear reviews, the whole point of doing these reviews is not to be gentle and easy on the equipment, right? It's to use it in the worst possible manner. So, and it could also be as simple as I got a defective handle. Plain and simple.
Exactly.
And I'm not.
Sorry. Go ahead.
And I'm not. By far, and I have had people comment on it and go, "Oh, it's just cheap Chinese junk," and I don't necessarily believe that's true, because in every other feature, this thing has come through. It's just the handle broke for, like you say, maybe it was stored incorrectly. Anything new means nothing when it comes to automotive products. You can buy defective ones, really simple. This may be no different.
Yeah, we're at a time where, even products that are made domestically here in North America aren't the same quality that they once used to be. So, again, we can't necessarily speculate or jump to conclusions in this particular matter, but it will definitely be interesting to see your continuing quests with this shovel with the new handle now. And I'm actually that's an aspect that I really enjoy about what we do, is that we always get products, and sometimes they break. It doesn't matter where they come from, so we adapt them then to what we need them to do. And sometimes it's a simple fix, or sometimes again it's one of these odd defects. But we make them, we adapt them to our needs and make them even better. So I'm sure now that you've put that handle in there, that's not going to break. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you have.
For sure, yeah. I mean, and again, bushcraft is about adaptability. It's about survivability. And I mean, I don't think that's actually a word, survival. And the honest reality is, when you look at the human species, all of these amenities that we have, like cars and buildings and all of this stuff, this is fairly new in the grand scheme of humanity. I mean, humans have been around for, say, 1 million years. I don't know the exact number. How long have we had buildings and cars and houses and warm clothes and shoes? Just a fraction of the time, Like if you looked at a meter of being the time that humans were on the planet, all of these modern amenities would make less than a centimeter of that time. So we have to be resilient. We have to be, strong. And people who seem to lose sight of that are really doing not only themselves, but humanity a disservice in saying, okay, I can't do this. You can do it. You can adapt. You can look at a problem, and we can solve it. That's why we're still here, and we're not extinct like many other species have been in Earth's history.
And on that note, actually, we're going to go to a commercial break. When we get back, we're going to get some very interesting information from a special guest from Brothers of Bushcraft. So this is AD Venture and Wolfmaan. Seeing you on the other side.
MMA fighter, NASCAR driver, and oath keeper, Jeffrey Earnhardt has given us the chance of a lifetime. On June 1st, 2013, at Dover Speedway, he could drive an Oath Keepers NASCAR, putting Defend the Constitution flying around the track in front of 40,000 live fans and 1.5 million fans in the TV audience. This is the biggest chance in a lifetime to educate a generation about the Constitution that has probably not seen it promoted in any other medium. It's up to us. They only need to raise $3,000 by May 1st, 2013 at midnight Eastern Time to make this happen. Go to oathkeepers.org, that's oathkeepers.org now, and help us defend the Constitution.
You know know the Constitution like the back of your hand. You've read books, listened to podcasts, attended lectures, surfed websites, and watched videos. You've made liberty your life's goal, but something seems to be missing. Stickers from LibertyStickers.com. Exercise your freedom of speech with the world's most dangerous bumper stickers. That's LibertyStickers.com. But wait, there's more. You can buy Liberty Stickers wholesale. Get them for 99 cents each when you put 100 or more in your shopping cart in any combination. Sell them or give them away. They're great for gun shows, flea markets, fairs, outreach, and more. Earn extra money, promote freedom, and spread the word. Need custom stickers, labels, or decals for your organization or business? Liberty Stickers makes them. Go to LibertyStickers.com to order or call 877-873-9626. LibertyStickers.com, the world's most dangerous.
Get ready for the epic new documentary adventure ride of your life. Shade the motion picture. A view into the globalist domain and embellish and Burma's film.
Nothing in this world works the way you think it does. Nothing. Governments do not operate the way you think they do. Banks do not do what you think they do. The police department is not here for what you think it is. Nothing in your world works the way you think it does.
We had to let them know that their world government has been identified, and they thought they'd include the world economy to bring in a worldwide police state, but instead, it's going to bring them down.
You have to stand up, speak up, speak out. Shade the motion picture. Order your copy of the DVD today at shadethemotionpicture.com.
This is Mercy. If you're listening to this message, warriors, you are the resistance. Warriors, you are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. Read about it in The Sovereign, newspaper of the resistance. Available now at newsstands everywhere. The Sovereign is a monthly 24-page tabloid newspaper featuring incendiary content about life during wartime in the age of Obama. Warriors, keep to date every month. Remember to read The Sovereign, newspaper of the resistance. Available at newsstands everywhere. This alert is for all you boppers out there in the big city, all you street people with an ear for the action. This is Mercy. If you're listening to this message, warriors, you are the resistance. This is Mercy. Mine will be the last voice you will ever hear. Don't be alarmed.
Want to spread awareness to your neighbors, family, and friends about what is going on in our country today? It may be things you already know, like the large number of FEMA camps spread around this country to lock up citizens like you and me. What legislators are doing to strip states and people of their sovereign rights. Or legislation giving states the power to force vaccinate under a declared state of emergency. Do your neighbors understand what is going on? William Lewis Films offers the perfect tools to inform our population about this government's tyrannical shift from a constitutional republic to a despotic democracy. Films like 911 Ripple Effect, Beyond Treason, One Nation Under Siege, Washington You're Fired, Camp FEMA, Enemy of the State, Don't Tread on Me, Blood of Patriots, The Ron Paul Uprising, even 911 in Plain Sight, William's first production, are all available at WilliamLewisFilms.com. Get your DVDs today at WilliamLewisFilms.com. Educate against the police state.
And this is AD Venture here at the Barefoot Bushcraft radio show, coming back from the other side of commercials. And I'm joined here with my host, the Wolfman. And who do we have with us?
We have a special guest and friend of mine, Caleb, and he's a really fascinating guy. I think everybody who's listening is going to have a great time with everything that we're going to talk about. Why don't I let you introduce yourself, Caleb? Because I know you have a really fascinating and rich history, and for your company and everything else that you do.
Awesome, thank you. My name's Caleb Musgrave. I'm the founder and director of Canadian Bushcraft. I'm also one of the founding members of the Brothers of Bushcraft, which is a worldwide international group mostly focusing on teaching people different skills from different ecosystems. Me coming from Canada compared to the guys down in Utah and Arizona, as well as different backgrounds of training. We've got guys that are former SEER instructors for the U.S. Marine Corps. We've got guys that have been focusing so much on desert survival and desert skills and traditional skills from that area. Me coming in as a guy from Ontario who focuses a lot on boreal forest, but also the Carolinian mixed hardwood plains and the Black Oak Savanna. My background is a lot different than their background, so it's a really cool group that way. Myself, I'm a Mississauga Ojibwe. I actually live in my community. I live in Hiawatha First Nation, which is on the north shore of Rice Lake. We're known as the Mississaugas of Rice Lake, though there is another group on Rice Lake, that's Elderville First Nation. I guess we're just proud enough and arrogant enough to think we're the only ones down here. But we have been around for thousands and thousands of years. In this region, we've been here historically and archaeologically. We've been here for, different people say different things. A lot of people believe, though, that we are actually the descendants of the mound builders, the Point Peninsula complex in particular, which are the ones that made like the Serpent Mounds, the petroglyphs up in Petroglyphs Park north of Peterborough. We had a lot of involvement in this area historically and again, prehistorically. And it comes down to whose history is whose, because we are an oral language. We're oral history. We believe in a lot in our oral culture and what we know coming down from our ancestors and through our elders' teachings. We know are fact. We believe them as fact as anything you can see from an archaeological record. And oddly enough, they match up very, very frequently, even though one of them is telling us stuff from carbon dating and mitochondrial DNA. It's matching up almost perfectly with the history, with the stories we're learning from our elders who haven't even been on this planet more than 100 years. And these stories are coming down thousands of years ago. So that's where I come from. A lot of my background, a lot of my training comes through the stories and the skills I learned from my elders.
That's good to hear. I personally, I've been to the Petroglyphs Provincial Park, and that it's amazing. Like, there's really no words to describe it, and there's definitely something there that cannot be described with words. I don't know if you can speak to that particular aspect, Caleb, but I've heard other individuals speak about that of this particular site, the petroglyph site.
Now, we should probably tell some of our listeners who aren't familiar what are petroglyphs exactly.
Petroglyphs are this really, really cool phenomena that happens from humankind being in this area. In particular areas, you'll find the right kind of stone that can be shaped. That's right on the ground, like a, say, glacial till. You'll have big boulders on the ground that obviously humans didn't put there. The glaciers put it there. But they'll have markings engraved into them. And often up in the Canadian Shield, you can find them, but they're very, very rare compared to, say, down in the southwestern United States, where you find in Arizona and New Mexico, almost every rock face has them. Almost every rock shelter, like a big cave, you'll find petroglyphs in there. They're a little different than your cave paintings that you see in, like, Lascaux Caves. That's what I'm thinking. I was putting that place where the Vikings were and the place in France together. Lascaux Caves has a lot of amazing, amazing paintings in there, but those are not petroglyphs. Those are cave paintings or rock paintings. Many of the times you find a petroglyph, it's going to be very small, just basically looks like somebody scratched it into the rock. And sometimes it's really deeply etched in there, depending on the tools that they had at the time. And if anybody has much experience with flint knapping and stoneworking technology, this technique that's being used is usually pecking. What we do to make a stone axe is often pecking and grinding, rather than actually sitting there and napping it out, taking a piece of flint and snapping it in two and getting a sharp edge from it. With pecking and grinding, you're taking a slightly softer stone and taking a harder stone and hammering that softer stone, and so making etches into it. And the average one, it's about a thumb width wide and as long as they can possibly go. And they'll make shapes such as canoes. They'll make shapes such as people with split heads, people with serpentine tails. Different designs happen. Up at the petroglyphs, which are the most famous ones here in Canada, well, at least in eastern Canada, the petroglyphs at Petroglyphs Park, there's amazing ones there. There's ones that look like what we call Nanabojo or Nanabush. There's also ones that look like, and Nanabush being our cultural hero, our version of Hercules or Thor. Nanabojo being there. We also have a turtle carved into the rock there. There's even one that looks like, in some people's opinions, it looks like a dragon boat, like what you would see from the Vikings. But there's a lot of differing opinions on what that actually is. There's even opinions who actually believe that it may have actually been a vandalized canoe that somebody made to look like a Viking ship. And then others say that it is a Viking ship. So I'm not really sure where I stand on that, but it's an amazing site. It's very, very large. You may think that all the petroglyphs are inside the building, but they're not. There's others out there that we do not know are out there that people just stumble across every once in a while. And all around that area, you can occasionally find like the occasional arrowhead. You can find the occasional spear point. And when I say arrowhead, I'm talking about things that are about the size of your thumbnail, because anything bigger than that was very rarely shot from a bow. That was way too heavy. It was way too much mass. It would not let the arrow fly properly. Anything usually larger that you see in an archaeological, in say a museum, or you see in like somebody's personal collection that's bigger than say a thumbnail to maybe 2 thumbnails, anything bigger than that is usually actually a dart head, something from being launched from a projectile such as an atlatl. So that's what you usually see. We actually find those quite frequently down here on Rice Lake. I live a 5-minute drive from the Serpent Mounds, which is a very large mound builder complex, which is a very, very interesting thing where you see bodies being put into tombs, but these tombs being connected by each other with earth and mass. And this earth and mass often gets turned into shapes. If you look at Cahokia, which is an amazing site down in the States, it's got Monk's Mound in it. Monk's Mound is actually larger than all 3 of the pyramids of Giza combined. And it's a huge, huge complex made by human beings with no technology beyond the Copper Age. And that's something that's kind of a misconception that people have about First Nations, is that we were stuck in the Stone Age. Well, we weren't. Do you look at the eastern woodlands, copper was being mined up in Lake Superior and shipped all the way down to Mexico, all the way up into the Arctic, all the way out to Newfoundland, and even further west. Copper was everywhere. And that's why when silver came in, you look at trade silver being hung off of a lot of reenactors and Native American paintings, you see all the silver and say, why do they get so big on the silver? Well, they just looked at it as an exotic form of copper. It's just another form. And copper was very, very common. In fact, there's certain people that believe that we were, that Native peoples, First Peoples, were actually on the verge. We were just on the cusp of becoming the Bronze Age. And the reason being for that was because we still had glaciers here when Europe didn't. So we were a little bit further back. We were still in the Paleo period when over in Europe you guys were in the Mesolithic. Well, you guys are here from Canada. But European heritage has a much further back history of getting out of the Paleolithic era than the First Nations here in Canada, because we were still dealing with mammoths. We were still dealing with oryx. We were still dealing with cave bears. Well, we had the short-faced bear. That's not really a cave bear. It's a relative to a cave bear. And we were dealing with those things while trying to deal with the environment around us. And then later on, we came in around 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, we started getting into copper making. So we were just behind you guys, just by a few centuries, maybe a couple millennia.
Yeah, now I've been to some of your talks. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, you do talks and lectures and things. And one of the things you had said, and I use this almost every time I do archery with students, is that when it comes to primitive skills, all human history shares the same thing. When you're holding a bow or you're using a drum, like your ancestors, tens of thousands of years ago, had sat around a magic circle, had beat on a drum, they'd held a bow and arrow in their hand, and we would not be here today if it wasn't for these primitive tools. Exactly. And that is something that has resonated so deeply inside me. And it really was, it was one of those moments when I first heard you speak of that. It was like, like your pupils dilate and your nose clears, and it's like, whoa. and that's really fascinating. Like you were saying that in other parts of the world we seem to move forward at a different rate than we did, than we did here in North America. But we all have that history. We all have that passion. Now, I just want to touch a little bit about the petroglyphs. Now, I saw a man speak at one of the primitive skills gatherings here in Ontario about a book that he had written called Build a Leather Boat. I don't know if you're familiar with the book or anything about it.
I know a lot about this. I believe this man was one. I believe it was the Celts that may have had involvement with the petroglyphs. Yes,
that it was Queen Boadicea who'd come down, and one of the petroglyphs is a depiction of an ancient Celtic instrument. And I don't know if you think that's total hogwash, or if there's any, or I'd just like to hear your opinion on that, if you don't mind giving it, of course.
My opinion is pretty straightforward on this. I'm not a believer nor a disbeliever in any theories. There's a lot of First people that don't believe that the Bering Strait happened, and there's a lot of people out there that believe that the Bering Strait didn't happen at all. And there's other people that believe in the Solutrean hypothesis, which is actually that during the last big ice age in Europe, which was about 14 to 20,000 years ago, maybe even further back, people from an area that is between France and Spain called the Solutrean culture may have actually come across into Virginia. And we found mitochondrial DNA proving that. We found a lot of evidence showing technology that is from that region showing up only on the eastern seaboard very, very soon after that ice age happened. And there's a lot of hypothesis, and what he's brought up with this Celtic hypothesis is merely that, a hypothesis. This is an idea with a little bit of evidence, not enough to prove or disprove it, though hypotheses can be disproven much faster than a theory can, such as the Bering Strait theory. See, we have enough evidence with mitochondrial DNA, with carbon DNA, with carbon evidence like radiocarbon dating, to know that the Bering Strait most likely happened. Right. Which gives it the idea of being a theory, just like the Big Bang theory, just like the theory of evolution. These things more likely than not happened. Whereas with hypotheses, we don't have enough evidence to prove that they did happen, and therefore they're very easily broken. You find enough people showing certain pieces of evidence, such as mitochondrial DNA or radiocarbon dating, to prove what this man's belief is, then it most possibly did happen. But at the same time, we have to remember that there is a lot of people that believe that the petroglyphs were actually vandalized. Those giant arrowhead-looking shapes, there's certain photographs that existed before 1955 that didn't actually show those giant arrowheads in the pictures. And suddenly they show up in 1955 in the exact same picture that weren't there before. So there's belief that people may have actually added to those petroglyphs to try and embellish them and try and make them look bigger than before, because at that time in the 1950s, most archaeology was being focused on Egypt. There wasn't much evidence and much interest in North American archaeology. A good example of these theories where it must have been a European that did these things. There's a lot of people that think that the composite bows of North America were inspired by the Vikings and by Scythians and maybe Mongolians coming over. There's all these theories of that, and there's also a lot of theories that say that the mound-building culture was not Native Americans at all. There's people that believe it may have been Atlantis. There are people that believe there was Europeans coming over. There's even guys that think the Vikings made the mound builders, inspired the mound builder culture. And there's and this is going back, way back. I'm talking like all the way back to the 17th century and 18th century. George Washington and a lot of other founding fathers of the United States of America were very interested in the mound builders, but very few of them would ever say that it had to have been the Native Americans. The reason being, well, Native Americans are too stupid to make those things. And that was the idea back then. That was the image that they had about the Native peoples. Oh, they live with stone tools, and we just showed them metal for the first time now. They don't even know how to make their own metal tools. All the while, we're wearing copper gorgets and we're wearing copper decorations, and they're saying these things to us.
And that's not to speak about what you find in South America.
Oh, man, you compare it like the Mayans, the Aztecs. Like these cultures were around for thousands of years, if not longer than just a few thousand years in some places, in some circumstances. 90% of vegetables and fruit that are now worldwide in grocery stores originate in the Americas. Potatoes, carrots, pawpaw, which is actually an amazing fruit that is not eaten very often these days, but it's become more of an exotic fruit, ironically from the States. You look at a lot of food, like blueberries, cannot be found very frequently outside of the Americas except for in certain parts of Siberia. Again, here comes the Bering Strait theory. There's a lot of food that comes from this land, corn, beans, squash, instantly. The Three Sisters Garden instantly comes to mind when you think about American food or pre-European American food. And when I say American, I mean North American. I mean South American. I mean the entire form of the Americas. Like the tobacco comes from North America and comes from the Caribbean. It doesn't come from North America, it comes from the Caribbean. Sorry about that. A lot of food comes from this continent. It comes from the southern continent of South America and Central America and the Caribbean, and it comes from all over the world. They get their food originally from here. Nowadays, most of our food is being farmed internationally. We import the majority of our food that Canadians eat, and most of the food that we grow here is exported outside of the country. To me, it's dumbfounding to think that way because I'm a bit of a locavore myself. But you got to remember that most of the food that is now spread out across the world, and they have corn being grown in Africa and beans being grown in Asia, and of course potatoes being grown in Europe. You think of the potato family, you think Ireland. You don't think potatoes would start here. You think potatoes would be a cultural thing from Ireland. But it originates here. It originates in your backyard. It's something that I find very intriguing about the culture here.
Wow. And, and it's unfortunate. We were just talking about this just before you came in, and, you're talking about the greatness of these cultures that were here and the ornateness. And I have seen in my cultural history is Celtic, and I'm looking at some of the equipment and the tools, and it's like, how did you guys build this stuff without a Dremel? And I see, like you were saying, all of this culture existed, and we've only had electricity for a little over 100 years. That we managed for millions of years as humans as a species, as a hardy, resilient people that, like you said, traveled around the world on foot, and that's it's mind blowing. I mean, I couldn't imagine walking to my corner store, and I live in the country, so it's 10-15 kilometers, let alone walking to South America.
Oh, definitely.
You know?
There's a very interesting theory that came up. Well, it's actually not even a theory. It's very well known. Well, I guess it is a theory, but it's very well known that the Ojibwe culture, the Anishinaabe, which is what my ancestry is, we're Mississauga Ojibwe. We're a sub-tribe of the Ojibwe Nation. The trading network went from East Coast to West Coast to the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic. And you've ever heard the name Pasadena, California, or Pasadena, Texas? Pasadena is where that word comes from. That literally means the foggy sound. So it's a name, a description of a place in the Ojibwe language far, far, far from the Ojibwe territory. Like the Ojibwe territory is mostly Great Lakes, Eastern Woodlands area. At the farthest south, Indiana, Ohio, maybe at one time, mostly Wisconsin, Minneapolis, or Minnesota, sorry. Indiana, Minnesota, over into very farther New York, and of course Michigan, the Upper Peninsula is almost nothing but Ojibwe with a little bit of Wendat. And then you get up into Ontario, Manitoba, a little bit of Quebec, but most of Quebec and eastern Ontario is Algonquin, and then Haudenosaunee or Six Nations down to the south. Like the Ojibwe culture was very big. We're still one of the largest nations in Canada, the largest being the Cree, which is actually a relative of ours. We call them our brothers. The Ojibwe culture was huge, but our influence in North America was even bigger. At one time there was called a trade pigeon called Ojibwa Pidgin. And Ojibwa Pidgin was actually the language that traders would use to communicate with one another. And that trade pigeon became the Francolingua, or the language of the land of North America. If you were a French trader, you just spoke Ojibwa Pidgin, and you'd be able to understand each other when you came up into a village, rather than showing up and, these guys are Wyandot, or these guys are Potawatomi, or these guys are, say, Mi'kmaq, or Métis up into the far north, or Cree. You would speak Ojibwa Pidgin, you'd understand each other, whereas if you were a French trader without that Francolingua, or that language of the land, you'd have to learn 15, 20, 30 dialects and languages, let alone dialects. Like between Hiawatha First Nation and Curve Lake, there's a completely different dialect. The languages are very complicated, and so the fact that our language has influenced a lot of North America, like the word moccasin comes from Makizan or Makazin, which is an Ojibwe word for a piece of skin you wear on your foot. Wigwam comes from the Ojibwe language, and it means a dwelling or to dwell. So these words that come around and people think are just Native American words, they come from us. Even the word totem, people think of totem poles, or they think of, here's my animal spirit, or this is my animal helper. Well, totem actually doesn't mean that. Totem comes from Dodem, and Dodem means this is my clan. So I am Bazunashi Dodem, which means I'm White Crane or Whooping Crane clan. And that's my Dodem, that's my clan. That's not my spirit helper. That's not my animal spirit. That's nothing like that. But that's where the word comes from. And it's really interesting to see that expansive culture and how complex the languages are and how complex the tools are. Like when I was probably 14 years old, I made my first stone axe. Well, that stone axe was made with a bench grinder of all things because, like you said earlier, how would you as a kid, I couldn't comprehend how my ancestors made these things without modern technology. Even now, when I make bows, I've got right now sitting in front of me probably about 6 bows that I'm working on, and these bows were all made with steel tools. I think I've got 3 bows in my collection that were made with stone tools, and those are the most heavy, laborious work I've ever done making a weapon in my life. It's very complicated to work, and if you're not experienced doing that, you're not going to get very far easily. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of trial and error to make these tools. Making clay pots, making stone containers such as a soapstone kudlik, making things of any kind that are pre-metal are very, very complicated to do with very little training. It's very complicated to do. The further you go with it, like you can see people making tools very, very easily. I've got a good anecdote from a friend of mine. He was down in South America, and while he was down there, he actually witnessed a guy kill a small type of deer. And he killed it, and they went to gut it, and they basically just took their machete, turned it out so they used the spine like a hammer and broke one of the legs. And then they split that leg open with those breaks, And those sharp pieces of bone, those green pieces of bone, were used to skin the entire animal because they didn't want to dull their machete for the rest of the time they were out there. So they were using bone right there to skin open that animal. We used it's incredible. We used a bone, just because of that inspiration, we used a piece of bone. It was a lot drier. It had been around for a long time. It was a moose bone rib cage piece that I cut and shaped into a knife like 2-3 years before we used it. We used it actually to skin out a beaver about 2 falls back. And it's amazing how efficient it is because it's not going to actually slice the skin. When it's that drier bone, that older bone, it's too dull to actually scrape the skin. All it's doing is separating the membrane of the flesh from the skin. So you can very quickly skin out a beaver, and when you look at it, you barely have to flesh it afterwards because it's so clean. Whereas I was using a flake at one point. I was using a stone flake to skin it around the leg. I was just leaving chunks of meat all over that skin. And a steel blade, the same thing. You're just leaving meat hanging all over that skin. You're leaving chunks missing out. You're slicing the skin open. But that bone tool just immediately, the animal comes with its own skinning kit. I love it.
That's incredible. That really gets me excited. These little things, that you learn, are just so essential when it comes to bushcraft.
Definitely.
And I mean, the people who lived in, like our First Nations people who lived here before European settlers, I mean, these continents were built on bushcraft. They were built on these kind of historic tools. And I mean, it's so amazing to think of how separated we are as modern-day people from all of this. And I'm sure even you as First Nations people get separated from the old ways.
The form of, I don't want to get this into too much of a depressing tone, but there's a lot of assimilation that happened here in Canada alone. I'm not sure everybody knows that. It's something that we don't really hear about. I knew of residential schools growing up because of my family experience with it, but I never heard it once brought up in a high school or a grade school as a kid. And I was in a community where we had Native kids from the reserve growing up in the same schools as the non-Native kids, and the non-Native kids not knowing a single thing about the residential schools, where they took kids that were up to 5, 6, 7 years old and tore them away from their families and abused them and treated them like filth and made them hate their own culture and refuse to speak their own language.
Tried to eradicate their culture and tried to make them ignore basically millennia and tens of millennia, really, of learnings and cultures that were available. It's definitely another black eye when it comes to the history of Canada or modern Canada and the First Nations of this continent.
Most definitely. Wow. Our ancestry, we have a very proud heritage. Canadians should be proud of their heritage because up until the 18th century, we were all living as allies. We were fighting the Americans in the War of 1812, and the first people and the British and the Canadian regulars joined forces to do that. We were all equal up until a gentleman called Sir Bondhead, which I think is the funniest name ever. But he was the one that pretty much changed that and started turning it into the Canadians are now going to own the Indians. And that was the concept that came in. And when that happened, we lost a lot of our heritage, but not all of it. Not everybody lost it. There's a lot of you go up into James Bay with the Swampy Cree, the Mushkegowuk. They speak their language very fluently. They know how to skin a beaver very quickly. They know how to process animals. They know how to track. They know how to build an estigan. They know how to make a Wiskachechak-chan, which is their old dwellings before they had canvas. They know how to do these things. They know how to work a crooked knife. They know how to drop a tree fast. The technology is still there with the elders, and that's where a lot of us have to go to learn these things.
Wow. Well, I apologize for cutting you off, but we are running out of time. But what I would like to do is definitely invite you back again. I mean, we could have you talk for hours and hours as a guest on our show because I find it very fascinating, everything, about the culture and about how important bushcraft and outdoor skills were to the people that lived here before us, and it's just been fascinating. But I'd like to, again, thank you so much for taking 45 minutes out of your day to give us a ring and talk to us about bushcraft and the First Nations people of Canada. It's been very educational, and thank you very, very much.
Caleb, why don't you give one more time, why don't you give out the website address that people can see what you do and contact you?
You can find us, our website is actually down right now because we're doing some work, but you can find us at CanadianBushcraft.ca. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Facebook page. You can check us out on the web anywhere you want to go. We have a schedule being worked on right now, so we'll be starting to do up really cool programs coming this summer and early fall.
Well, that's great to hear. Again, so glad that you joined us today.